What's up, dude? We're back.
What is going on?
We're back. Hopefully, we don't have any internet issues this week. Holy crap. Got everything cut off last week right at the end. Like, no. So,
Yeah, I think I'm still wearing the same shirt. So I was hoping, I was hoping to just play it off like we just had to do it in two parts, right? That's what we were doing.
So my standard uniform is a black t-shirt, blue jeans, and one of my like anti-sweat ball caps. I'm pretty sure I'm wearing the exact same thing I've been wearing every time we do this episode. Trust me, I actually do laundry, but that's, you know.
He's very tidy. He's a very tidy man.
Hey, what can I say? So
good hygiene.
We try. So I kind of wanted to lead this week, get your hot take on something I've been following for a while, and then obviously we got to catch up from last week. So I'm happy.
Yeah, we got dropped off on a few things that we just had on the docket for last time, and we kind of pontificated a little much on a couple of other ones, and then the internet gave us the giant FU.
Yeah, gave us the boot. It was like, you've had enough.
But yeah, anyway, so you've been kind of hinting at me throughout the day that there's something that you were kind of wanting to kind of tackle and kind of go into. Is what, pray tell, could this be? Because it's not on my radar. So or maybe it is. I just don't know. So let's go.
It's nothing I gave you context for, but I'm going to lead with a bit of a story that culminated on September 14th, earlier this last week. And it's California Bill AB 957, which now requires...
It's already ought to be good.
Yeah, it makes me furious when I think about it, but 957 would require family courts to interpret a child's health, safety, and welfare to include a parent's affirmation of child's gender identity for the purposes of custody disputes. So the bill, which is now passed through the state assembly and on its way up to the Senate, was sponsored by Lori Wilson. She encouraged the transition of her own child, and who would like to see similar laws enacted in every single state is a piece of last year's trans tourism bill. And this is encouraging out-of-state minors to travel to California to undergo transition treatments behind their parents' backs, as well as a bill passed earlier this year requiring foster parents to agree to best practices for providing care for LGBTQ plus youth, including, of course, gender-affirming care. And already we've kind of seen the toxic effects of the gender ideology infiltrating family law. This is now codified. Across the country, activist-minded judges are penalizing parents who don't accept the claims of trans activists. Judges in California, Illinois, and Texas have denied custody rights to divorced parents who are opposed to or even skeptical of their child's transition. In some cases, judges have received special training on these matters from transgender activists. AB 957 goes even further than favoring one divorced parent over another for political reasons in interpreting the refusal to affirm gender identity as an affront to a child's health, safety, and welfare. The bill effectively defines non-affirmation as abuse at this point, and that's in California state law. So if a parent can lose custody rights after a divorce for not affirming his or her child, what's now to stop the state from removing children from happily married or even single-parent homes? And it's happening already in a lot of jurisdictions. And there's an example here. This came from NPR across AP Press. And this is striking. The year is striking to me. But Abigail Martinez, a single mother of 4 living in Los Angeles, whose trans-identifying teenager was removed from her custody back in 2016 by a judge interpreting non-affirmation as emotional abuse at the time. And oddly, the judge permitted Martinez to retain custody of her other 3 children and to continue working as a nanny after 3 years of her daughter living in state custody and undergoing hormone treatments the entire time. The abuse charges against Martinez were changed by the Department of Child and Family Services from substantiated to inconclusive. But too little, too late. The damage was already done, and a month later, her daughter, by then a severely depressed 19-year-old who had spent critical years away from her family, took her own life by kneeling in front of a moving train. So laws like AB 957 would make stories of Martinez less of egregious outliers and closer to the new legal norm in demanding parental affirmation, the bill sets zero requirements for clinical evaluations and includes no mention of mental health conformities, whether they're depressed, autistic, bullied, sexual abuse survivors. If the kids say they're trans, they're fucking trans. End of discussion. And under such a broad definition of child abuse, even the wider community, schools, churches, other organizations, community centers, your coach could all be obliged to affirm. All this while the global credibility of gender affirming model is substantially crumbling, in my opinion. But on trans issues in California, California state is losing its collective fucking mind. And so I've been waiting to see if this would hit Newsom's desk and slide right through. It absolutely did at 4:40 p.m. on the 14th last week. And I was just like, okay. So I recognize it's packaged within a greater agenda, but at the end of the day, it's absolutely absurd to me. Also, if you have external speakers that you can hear me through, maybe turn those down. I can catch a bit of an echo. I don't know if you're hearing me from anywhere else, but I just wanted to hear your take on that, man. Like, that's patently absurd to me. And now it's law. So if you're going into a custody case in California, that's 100% going to factor into the child's health, safety, and welfare, and whether or not you're abusing your child just by being potentially skeptical of it. And that's the world we live in.
Honestly, you have blindsided me with this particular topic, because this is something that we wrestle with, because we're heavily involved in the school systems, and this is rearing its ugly head in the school systems pretty frequently. Obviously, to a much lesser extent here in the very red region of Idaho, but as a California native, as somebody who hails from these regions and still has family there, I still have family in that area who have kids.
Yep.
And so it is terrifying to me that this ideology has taken such a death grip on the people of, I don't know, it's so maddening to me and so angering that it's hard for me to find words. What I would suggest, that if there is anybody listening who has a legal mind or has access to advocacy groups, that maybe you start collectivizing a coalition of people who then, every time one of these trans kids, that the court and the school system and the counselors and the doctors all force-fed this insane ideology that is absolutely anti-scientific, absolutely backwards, and damaging to these children. It is abuse. That when one of those children that you've led down this path and gave them the legal right to do, when they throw themselves in front of a train or slit their wrists in a bathtub or put a gun in their mouth, that you be legally held liable for their death. That those people, not the parents did everything they could to help their child, and you blocked them, and you gave this child access to hormones their bodies could not control, to surgeries they could never reverse, to drugs to help with their mental issues, with their emotional issues, and got them further down that path of destruction, despair, and degeneracy. And you're to blame. You're to blame, and you should be held accountable and serve, in my opinion, worse than jail time, but at least jail time. At the very minimum, years in jail. Every judge, every lawyer, every doctor, every counselor, every school teacher, every single person who affirmed this kid's poor mental health delusion and put them through irreversible insanity.
That's the whole point, where I'm like, I mean, when I was younger, between, I don't know, 6 to 10 years old, I wanted to be a fire truck. You know what I mean? Is they going to start gluing axles to my butt cheeks and take me down to Discount Tire to get 18 wheels installed? Like, it just, I watched this and went, there's no shot that this is going to make it past the state level, right? Like, this is patently absurd that you're taking that much virtue signaling and ideology and pushing it into family law. Surely judges will be like, that's not what the California Penal Code describes as abuse. Like, this is nice try. We'll try again. And no.
Well, and this is the precursor for
sailed right through.
For civil conflict. I'm not going to say civil war, but civil conflict. So let's say somebody in what's a state that's pushing back on this pretty hard currently? Like, let's say Tennessee or something like that, right?
Right.
So let's say somebody in Tennessee has two parents. One parent says, I want to transition my son into a girl. The other parent says, are you insane? That's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Causes divorce. Mother then in the night, and I'm always assuming it's the mother because it's very rarely the father. So sorry if I'm making an assumption, but it's the reality. Takes the kid, and this has also happened before, but takes the kid to California, where it's basically now a sanctuary, transgender sanctuary state.
That's exactly right.
Where now it doesn't matter what the laws in Tennessee are. It doesn't matter what the laws in Idaho are. It doesn't matter what the laws anywhere else are. They're going to basically give the bird to the rest of the country's laws and say, you don't have a right to your own child here. And in fact, we will criminally charge you if you come across this border and try to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that this is going to cause? Do you think it's going to cause a situation where maybe a father at the end of his rope takes desperate measures in order to make sure that irreversible damage doesn't happen to his child? That would be the righteous and good thing to do for that man to do. Is it the legal thing? No, but it's the right thing.
I can imagine a legal precedent of when you're an adult and you want to go through these changes and you can sign for yourself. Okay. Do I agree with it? No. Do I think there's some psychological studies around when your brain is fully formed as an adult? Like I think it's like in your 20s at some point. Maybe you should hold off and wait on that. That'd be my personal opinion. But I think as an adult, that's probably where I would sit down and be like, okay, well, if they're an adult and they want to go through transition surgery, go for it. But can we leave the kids? Can we leave the kids,
like you said,
by themselves? And here's the other thing. Like, I have a concealed weapons license in a state that doesn't have reciprocity in other states, including the one I moved to. So wouldn't that be easier to find sanctuary in crossing state lines for, something I'm licensed to do? But California can make it illegal to go get your kid if it's in a sanctuary. Like, I mean, we're miles apart, but what the fuck, man? I couldn't believe it. It hit last week and I was like, God damn, dude. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
It is absolute pandemonium in California, and I implore anybody who still has kids in that state, it's done. Get out.
Get out.
Get out. You have to get out for the safety of your children. The school will tell your child, if for one day, or if you have a tomboy, or for one day your boy wants to play with something pink, one day, and they're like, oh, this kid wants to be a girl, or this kid wants to be a boy, and then they will indoctrinate that child until you are removed from their lives. They will then make them a ward of the state, chop off everything, pump them full of drugs and hormones, and then ruin not only the child's life, but the ripple effect that happens off of each one of those lives. And they don't care, and it's just going to get worse and worse. They need to be taught a lesson financially. Move. Get your kids out of those school systems. Get them out of the court systems. Get them out of the state. Do not provide them tax money. Do not provide them anything at all.
Right.
Literally drip them dry. Cut them off and keep them from ever being able to tap into taxpayer money to hurt your family. That's you have to hit them in the wallet. And you have to sue the pants off of them. I implore every single parent who's going through this heartache, through this hardship, to sue everyone individually. Don't sue institutions. Institutions can point the finger in different places. Sue people. Make it hurt. Make it hurt them so that they can't hurt your kids anymore. Yeah, it's insane that we're even having to discuss whether or not parents have rights over their own children,
And that's what I looked up. I actually dug out the Legislative Council Digest, looked up AB 957 to make sure I wasn't going nuts here. And it is family law, gender identity, period. Existing law governs the determination of child custody and visitation in contested proceedings and requires the court, for purposes of deciding custody, to determine the best interests of the child based on certain factors, including, among other things, the health, safety, and welfare of the child. And that's what this aims to change, is to slide gender affirmation as a requisite for the child's health, safety, and welfare, regardless of age, as long as they're minor. And that will be a determining factor in the Legislative Council's Digest for California State.
All other boxes can be checked. The child is well loved. The child is well clothed. All of its bills are paid. It's well fed. Its education is going well. Every other box that a healthy, normal child goes through is all checked. But if that one thing, you're like, well, you know what, David, I don't think that you're a Mary. I'm sorry. I'm your dad. I raised you. You're 14 years old. I know puberty's weird and hard and confusing, and you're getting a lot of mixed messages from school or from other influences. But here's the reality. You were born a boy, and you were always going to be that way. And it doesn't mean I don't love you any less. I mean, I absolutely love you for the way that you were made. However you want to take that, whether it's God made or nature made, however. Doesn't matter. I love you as your father the way you are. And you should love you the way you are. And we should affirm that. But if you're getting some chemical mix up, why don't we kind of explore the options of actually giving you the hormones maybe that you're lacking instead of the opposite sex's hormones? Why has that never been explored? Why has it never been explored that, oh, this person is feeling like they're in the wrong body. Their brain is in the wrong body. First of all, you need a point of comparison to be able to say that at all. No one knows outside of their own biological gender what it feels like to be the other biological gender because you don't have a point of comparison. But let's just say for the fantasy that you do. Why are we going, okay, as a medical practitioner, this is what I recommend immediately and in one visit. Why don't we just put you on cross hormones. Let's put you on the opposite gender hormones. That doesn't make any sense. Why are we
I
going chemically that way instead of the other way? We should be going, oh, maybe you're low on testosterone, or maybe you have a low level of
or maybe you're not hormonally balanced yet at all, and we just need to give it some time. But I also think kids that don't really understand the implications of perjuring themselves in court will probably just use that as leverage to go with mom or to go with dad, depending on who's ready to affirm their care. And it puts more power back into the kid's hands, even if it's not potentially the best way to go. Even if the parent that's awarded custody in these proceedings or whatever is just a smoother, less resistive ride for the child to go that direction. That's a play that they can make just by Googling without even, without seeking counsel of any kind. So there's layers to this that is damaging, and also sowing seeds of mistrust in the judicial system and the legal system. And it was asinine to me when I saw it proposed. I saw the stack of bills that needed to go into session and come out of it by a certain amount of time, and they pen whipped it right through. Of course we will.
Wow.
I also want to go ahead.
I was just going to add on to that.
Yeah.
What do I do for a living?
You draw on people.
I do. I color on people for a living. I've been doing it a long time. What is one of the stipulations of receiving my skill sets of what I do?
You have to be an adult.
You have to be 18.
Yep.
And the reason why you have to be 18, and this isn't controversial for some reason, is because it's permanent, and because a 17, 16, and 15-year-old do not know what they want. And after 25 years, I can tell you that's the truth. I've had to talk many a young kid out of even 19, 20-year-old kids that have really dumb ideas.
Yeah.
Because they don't know any better. And then I end up tattooing them. And then 10 years down the road, they go, which I've now have the length of experience to tell you, is that they come back and they go, wow, I'm so glad you didn't let me get that stupid tattoo. Now, why is that not controversial? There's far less damage of me coloring some stupid, like anime cartoon on a kid's hand than there is chopping off its genitalia and telling it and feeding into the delusion that it is something that it is not.
Right.
But we're totally okay. I don't have, we're in Idaho. So what's really weird is that Idaho has only one law, and that's that you have to be above the age of 14 with parental consent. I still don't tattoo minors, and I refuse to. I every once in a while get a pushback on a parent. From a parent saying, well, I can sign off on it. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, it's just my policy. And in my head, though, I'm going, why would you want to make your kid wait? Say no to a kid for once in its life instead of just saying yes to everything.
That's why my mom never cared about piercings. She's like, those will heal up. Just definitely make sure it's what you want to get. Really want to get, and I was like, in my early 20s, late teens and stuff. Like, yeah, it's just totally what I want,
Yeah.
But you're right. Yeah. And I don't understand parents that aren't parents, basically. I don't get it. Because it's like, not only are you training kids for future generations and stuff, but these are the people you want level-headed enough to take care of your old ass, so you gotta make sure they got a level head,
Right. And let's point out that I have not one, but two teenagers. I have a 17, almost 18-year-old, and I have a 14, almost 15-year-old. Both of them are legally allowed to get tattooed in the state of Idaho. Neither one of them have one because they've been taught, and neither of them want one yet.
I was going to say, which kid's going to get the first tattoo? Boy or the girl?
We have no idea. It bounces back and forth. Neither one of them have really expressed that they even want to. If you grow up in a tattoo shop, it's not taboo anymore. It's not really cool. It's whatever.
I have a bag of Werther's original candies to bet on the fact, because I'm that old, to bet on the fact it's probably going to be the girl, and it's probably going to be something really small that has to do with like Rush or like some sort of experimental band or something like that, like maybe over here or something like innocuous and tiny.
It's either going to be a band, a music or band tattoo, or it will be a literature one, whether it be something from Anne of Green Gables or something from what's her name? The chick author that she loves so much that all the girls love from the turn of the century. One of those kind of,
something Grapes of Wrath.
Not so much Grapes of Wrath, more Pride and Prejudice is what I was looking for. Yeah. So that kind of thing. It'll probably be something along those lines, but who knows? Like, they both toy around with ideas, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But at least I instilled in them the idea of making sure of like going, you need to wait until these decisions are clear in your head as you get older.
Right.
And, I don't think that kids are capable. And in fact, I know that they're not. It's not a thinking thing. It's an observation over of thousands of years of time, people understanding that there is a certain time frame when kids are capable of making their own decisions.
Right.
And for some reason, we have a push in our American and global society, actually, but American society is what I'm concerned with because we're supposed to be set apart. But that we're pushing forward this weird concept that kids have and autonomy
Mm-hmm.
outside of their family unit, outside of the construction of their family. And that doesn't make sense to me outside of a very dark and nefarious plot line. If you're pushing for that type of autonomy in these regards, where else are you trying to push this line?
Well, and it's weird because like you and I were raised in an era where we did not have sensory overload. Like this was the thing of science fiction movies. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that was
like
you have a Star Trek device in your hand right now.
100%. Like I couldn't get to far reaches of the internet. I didn't have influences every time I opened a web page. There was not the narrative among the people that I grew up around was primarily similar. You know what I mean? Like we all went through the same struggles in the same geographic environment with the same extenuating circumstances, and we all got our news from one of the 3 channels that we had. Like and that was if the rabbit ears were pointed in the right direction. So like,
right.
You know, to me, it's there has to be a level of filtering to a lot of that I don't think exists. It's why you hear me say over and over again, like there are far more influencers than leaders in today's day and age. Like, and you really have to parse through that to understand against your own convictions. But if you don't have any, it's very easy to get influenced by whatever looks good, feels good. You know, do as thou wilt comes from the Satanic Bible, for Christ's sake, and that's just you know, that's one of their commandments that seems to be just like, hey, self-serve platter of whatever feels good and looks good, and it is what it is. So I think there's a bit of a generational difference there in that we're not inundated with as much just raw information one way or the other. So
right.
You know,
well, in conclusion, I'm against it.
I agree.
And to a nearly violent level.
Yeah. I mean, as a parent, I'm sure that hits a lot different, you know, but
it does. And also a parent who has, you know, my kids have friends. My kids have a lot of friends that am now like engaged in their lives, whether it be through sports or the neighbor kids or, you know, and watching this. And I'll tell you right now, in my industry, there has been a high level, not oddly, but oddly, high level of the few tattooers that I know that have had kids.
Yeah.
Very few, and they're few and far between. Tattooers tend to be either vagabond in nature and don't really hold well to responsibilities or whatever the case may be. But the few that kind of somehow manage to squeak out a family life in the middle of the chaos of being a tattooer, what's really odd, and like I said, not very odd due to the nature of the beast, but I know probably 6 or 7 tattooers who now have kids, my kids' age, that are now transgender. And so that is the only sphere of influence where I am seeing this on a very
an intimate level. Yeah.
And a heavy scale,
right.
You know, like in comparison to the homeschool kids that I see, you know, on a frequent level, or the kids who are playing sports with my daughter, which it's funny because she actually just went to the Women in Red event.
Yeah, I saw that on Instagram from your wife's perspective, but yeah.
Yeah. So she got invited. Normally I get invited to those like fancy gala things, but I'm, angry with a lot of the people who would have attended, so I could not guarantee a zipped lip. So and then
talk to me,
bruh. It's a local feud thing that I've voiced my opinion a little too strongly in a couple of areas. However, but it also made more sense because it was a Women in Red event.
Yeah.
But the keynote speaker was Riley Gaines. Mm-hmm. And she was the swimmer who started voicing her opinion and coming out against the Leah Thomas situation. Right. And so she was the keynote speaker. So they invited a lot of women athletes from college and high schools in the area. Sure. And my daughter, being one of them, got invited to go and got to actually sit next to her and meet her. And it was really great for her. But man, that was super inspirational, but it was also very sad because this girl told story after story about how friends of hers who were just barely making the cut to make certain criteria finals and stuff were edged out of getting any opportunity they could possibly get. And of course, we can open up this transgenderism into sports and stuff, or prisons, or whatever the case may be, where we're actually having issues with this. And that's totally separate than the kids, but and the parents and the transition of kids during that scope of it. But the reality is that my daughter got to see firsthand and through the lens of this girl who's been affected by it, what the ultimate outcome on even the best case scenario of the transgender train is.
Right.
And that's the best case scenario. You know, there's no other way that lifestyle produces the results of anything better than being somebody who's faking to be in an area that they should not be,
right,
and is resented for it. Outside of that, it is destruction, it is decay, it is depression, it is regret, it is mental illness, and there's nothing that is going to save these kids because they're left on their own afterwards.
Right.
After all of that, they have no family to fall back on. They've got no friends. They've got this loose group of people who are just as mentally ill as they are, and no rudder and no structure, and they've got no direction. And it's a damaging thing that that California is implementing into law. And it's a horrific thing. And once again, get your kids out of there. And I'm fully against this.
Yeah. I got to take a quick shot before I turn it over to you from some of our last week titles that were title cards that were missed. I got to find ways to take shots here, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it. But friends, check it out. Methamphetamine and fentanyl are lurking on the bus and train surfaces. This is public transit throughout Seattle and Portland. A recent study by the University of Washington researchers found, which looked at possible secondhand drug exposure on public transit, found drugs in the air of all the vehicles, by the way. Health experts said the levels were too low for the drugs to have acute health effects for riders, but the study authors were still concerned about the potential physical and mental health effects of transit operators' workplace exposure to secondhand smoke and drug use. Real quick, I'm going to jam through this. There was meth on every surface the researchers tested. Every single one of the surfaces the researchers tested, and in almost all of the air samples. And there was
zipping off those buses.
Fentanyl on most of the surfaces, and in about a quarter of the air samples. So there's no, this spokesperson Baker, said there's no established state or federal standards for levels of exposure to fentanyl and methamphetamine. Washington does have a standard for decontaminating surfaces at methamphetamine production sites, but nothing for public places like transit. 2 of the surface samples from buses collected inside the filter housing of the ventilation system exceeded the standard they used to clean meth houses at meth production sites with. The study only, of course, tested for the presence of drugs in the environment. It didn't look at blood, urine, or any other biological markers that would show if people were absorbing the drugs, and if so, at what levels. That said, the quantity of the drugs found in the study are too small to be a risk for riders and employees, said Rob Hendrickson, a doctor specializing in clinical toxicology. In most cases, an exposure would be hundreds to thousands of times lower than what we would expect to cause clinical effects. I want to read the numbers. The study's detailed finding includes 25% of air samples of the 78 transit units, buses and trains, 78 total. 1 in 4 contain fentanyl. 100% of the air samples contain methamphetamine. 77% contained fentanyl in the air. 100% contained methamphetamine on surface areas. In the second set of surface samples, researchers first cleaned the surface, then they waited for the duration of an operator's shift before collecting a new sample for testing. Of those samples, after they sterilized the buses and let the night shift take over, 42% contained fentanyl, 98% contained methamphetamine. That's after they sterilized all 87 buses, sent them back out on the streets, and took them in at the closure of the following 8-hour shift. they still had almost 50% fentanyl samples in the air and 98% methamphetamine. Imagine being a Metro Transit driver in those conditions day after day.
Well, they could do triple shifts. That's the good thing.
So gotta take a shot at Seattle and Portland where I can, but I found that to be just hilarious. 100% of the surface samples and air samples contain both fentanyl and methamphetamine of the 87 they tested.
First and foremost, that's your taxpayer dollars at use.
Thanks, UW.
Yeah. Second of all, man, not only did I ride those public transits frequently, I was on those buses and on the light rail all the time.
Yeah, I used to hit the ride free when I was in Capitol Hill all the time. Yeah. Because it'd take you to Pike Street and back. You could go shopping. It was breezy.
Yeah. I had an apartment that was, miles away from the shop. So I would take the bus in every day instead of trying to find parking on Capitol Hill.
Right.
And then the light rail from the airport back and forth. And whenever we wanted to go to a different section of the city, we would just hop on the light rail. Right. Now that being said, it was sketchy all the time because especially after a certain time of night, like it's just basically a drug train. And full of homeless people and urine and stuff like that. But that's just kind of par for the course for metropolitan living. However, this is way beyond. And I know I still have a lot of what used to be friends and acquaintances that still use that system a lot.
Right.
When is it like, when do you start expecting taxpayer funded public transit accidental overdose deaths?
Yeah.
Like at what point does that toxicity level get to a level where someone sitting on a bus has an accidental fentanyl overdose due to the fact that they just can't seem to figure out how not to have drugs on their
and that's my whole point of this story is like, look, if you're just looking at a weekend reverie and you're going to sit there and tell me like, oh, all these videos I see of Seattle that looks like crap, there's the Seattle looks like shit Instagram page and all these people like doing meth on the buses. Oh, it can't be that bad. It's not every day. 100% of the surface areas and air quality of the first set of 87 buses they tested, all of them, they weren't missing a single one, not a bus, not a train, that did not have trace elements of these drugs on surface areas and post-filtration in the air quality that they tested.
Yeah.
To kind of an alarming degree. And there's some associated like video coverage of this story where you can, like a Metro bus driver was like, no, I get headaches every day. And like, it's this dog shit they're smoking on the bus and there's nothing we can fucking do about it. And so to those of you that are like, it's not that bad. Well, University of Washington did a test. Even the transit system's that gross. So enjoy that.
If anybody in Seattle is listening, once again, I'm going to go here. If you are in a situation where you have a loved one die on a bus from a overdose from this particular reason, or if you accidentally, get in a situation where you overdose in one case, on one of these transit systems, sue the hell out of people.
Sure.
And I'm not talking about institutions. Sure, sue the city of Seattle, sue the transit system, but sue the director of transit, sue the mayor, sue the people who are sue the city council, sue the county commissioners, sue them individually, sue them in a way that they will feel it and make change because their wallets make them make change.
That was my whole argument. Like toward the latter half of my time there in Seattle, I was like, no, this is like, there is an active campaign against car drivers in this city. Like I lived in an RTA where I had to pay the RTA excise tax, which was by my zip code, one of the more expensive areas to pay from. And then I'm like, why is it fucking like $700 for 1 year's worth of car tabs? And so they did this thing where they got all the votes, they put it in place, they enacted the fact that they're going to do a flat $40 registration fee for cars, and the peasants rejoiced. We were like, yay, because the state years prior voted down the Deep Bore Tunnel project like 6 straight times, and they went to Christine Gregoire at the time to get state funding So they took all the potholes you might be suffering through in Spokane. Well, you could thank Seattle for taking that money and digging a big ass hole with it. And then they put a toll road on that, and they reduced all of the transit lanes down to one. And I'm like, dude, West Seattle has 88,000 people in it, and we're all reduced to a one-lane road to go all the way around the bridge because they closed it down for all this cracking. And so I'm like, everywhere you turn, then they do construction on that one lane, and there's just miles of backed up traffic for hours of the day. And meanwhile, the only open lane is for bicyclists. So if you wanted to ride your bike all the way down and around and get into downtown, you could do that. And I'm like, there's a campaign against this. So they're like, fuck, everyone wants the $40 car tags. What do we do? Make it a constitutional problem and tie it up in litigation for years. And that's exactly what they did. Well, to your point, if you follow the money, like $88.5 million of city funding goes right into Metro, and that's immediately after they close 3 piers and the ride-free zone downtown. It's like, what are you doing with all this money? Well,
making bike lanes.
Now it's a wet house. That's what they're doing with the money.
Yeah.
The bus itself is a wet house. So
yeah. Roving opium dens.
I was tickled pink when I read that. Like, of course there is. Of course. 100% though. Even I'm a little shocked at that. So anyway, had to take a shot. So what'd you have? Because I didn't write it down last week. We had some stuff, and you had defending woke logic. And I did. Go for it. Take us away, man. What do you got?
I wanted to kind of defend some woke logic in the vein of our running theme here.
Yeah, let's go.
On occasion, the woke people of Wokeville start making some sense on occasion.
Sure.
And in this particular case, the concept of sanctuary cities in this country is perplexing to me. The only sanctuary city I think that should exist within the continental United States or otherwise would be a possibility of and it shouldn't even have to be, but like a Second Amendment sanctuary city. That's the only one I could get on board for. But for all of these other areas, such as
I think your whole state is a Second Amendment sanctuary, is what I think.
It's not. It's not.
It should be.
I know it should be. We've actually tried to push it through legislation, and it got shot down for basically like, well, what's the point kind of arguments,
Right.
We're already constitutional carry. What's the point? We're like, yeah, but we want it codified.
It's setting a precedent legally. Yeah. That's why.
Yeah. And so that will be, I think, on our next legislative session, we'll be pushing for that as well.
Nice.
But in this particular case, you got cities like San Francisco, and you got cities like New York City and Chicago, and all of these other kind of heavy metropolitan areas that have declared themselves sanctuary cities for illegal or non-documented citizens.
Sure.
And so, and they trumpeted it and raised the flags and told everyone else they were bad people for not following their suit. And
even AOC's own constituency was caught screaming at her in the background at the top of their lungs, where you couldn't even hear what she was saying in the interview.
Yeah.
About just this topic.
Right. And so now, all of a sudden, when the hordes and hordes and floods, since we have a completely open border, and it's not just people from south of our border, it is people from all over the country that are coming over that border, all over the world that are coming from that border, from every part of South America, lots of parts of the Middle East, lots of parts of Northern Africa, they're all merging through that channel and coming across our borders by the thousands every day. Well, Texas and Arizona and Louisiana and all of the border states that are all down there, California and stuff, they're all like, hold on, we can't take this. So they took it upon themselves, and in fact, other institutions have as well, whether it be good guys or bad guys on both sides of that fence, and started chartering buses to get them into other parts of the country. Now, we've actually had a couple of those happen here, and they all live in the cheap Motel 6s behind my tattoo shop. And then I see them bicycle around, and and I'm like, they come in to get tattooed, and it's not a Mexican ID, which is the going narrative that it's just a bunch of Mexican refugees, but they're all from South America,
right?
And they all have a lot of money and really soft hands, so they're not migrant workers, because I make a point of shaking all their hands and looking at their clothes, and none of them are. They're all wearing the Ross discount rack specials that they just purchased. And so, but that being said, these other cities have then now, with the open invite, have now been shipped many buses of these people. And now the tables have turned, and they're saying this is unsustainable.
Right.
We cannot sustain this.
The second that bus stops and kicks everybody off in Martha's Vineyard, everyone loses their fucking mind. Yeah.
Right, but even Eric, what's the mayor of New York? Eric.
Oh boy, I should know this.
Yeah, let's look him up real quick, because I had it all queued up last week, so I apologize, viewers, but
the internet betrayed us last week.
Yeah, Eric Adams. So
there we go.
Eric Adams it comes to mind specifically, but there have been other cases throughout the country of other mayors proclaiming the same thing and just going, "This is a crisis," and actually throwing down a decree of it being a state of emergency within their city because of the influx. We don't have the infrastructure. This isn't sustainable. We have to send them other places.
Oh no, here comes the health emergency.
Yeah, right. Yep. There's the health emergency that just has to happen in order for them to enact what they need, including, whatever. But I could not agree with you more, Eric Holder. Or Eric
Adams.
Eric Adams. Yeah, Eric Adams. I could not agree with you anymore. In fact, all of you guys, all of you big city mayors, I could not agree with you more. It is unsustainable. And we do not have the infrastructure for this. So once again, I agree with you guys on the woke side. And it's great that we could come together as a country to understand that we cannot afford to have this type of influx of a population that shouldn't be here. And it's not due to anything else other than the fact that they're not here legally. And, I'm glad we could agree on that. I'm glad.
Hey, man, sometimes you got to defend woke logic. You ready for a defending woke logic doubleheader?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, bro, when I called you a pussy, that wasn't me being an ass. That was my gender affirmation, bro.
Yes. Yeah, I was affirming your gender, pussy. Perfect.
Oh, yeah, we are minutes away from getting kicked off YouTube. I love this.
I am absolutely okay with it. But I'm going to start using that at the shop. I'm going to look at Frank straight in the face and go, "I'm affirming your gender, pussy."
Yeah. That's not me being an ass. That's me.
No.
That's me just defending your gender affirmation rights. That's all that is. So, oh man.
The other thing that I really wanted to do was I got to watch a movie last week that I didn't get to talk about. And then but before I get into that one, I kind of want to go, like you had mentioned this Robin Hood from 2010 with.
Yeah. It was just ironic that the undertones of the narrative kind of met the service of the podcast. It was like, I just watched this the other night. It's kind of funny how absolute power just rearing its ugly head. What'd you think?
I actually really enjoyed it.
It's good,
I really
right?
enjoyed. Yeah, it was a fantastic. It had the Ridley Scott feel to it. It was.
Yeah.
It was kind of gladiator-esque in the sense that it had the same key character, but also just the filming and the tone and the pacing of the film. But
gladiatory.
Yeah, gladiatory. But I absolutely loved it. I loved the take that they did on it, and I really loved the kind of, there was a subtle kind of push to kind of a sense of freedom and a push against kind of a monarchical system.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. Obviously it struck a chord with me, but that being said, I had one gripe with the whole movie, and it was near the end, and it was when they're going to do the final battle, and Maid Marian, played by Cate Blanchett, just decides to show up on a horse and in full armor and just goes, "I'm here for the battle." Fights for about 40 seconds before she then puts herself in dramatic danger that she has to get saved from, and then carried off. And I'm like, what was the point of that? Like,
me too. I was like, I like your spirit, but we kind of could have cut that out. I mean,
well, what I figured is that Cate Blanchett was like, I don't think so. I'm gonna, you've got to put me in a battle role here. And Ridley Scott's like, whatever, sure, you ride in on a horse,
right?
With like, it could have been just Friar Tuck and the boys from the woods. That would have been fine.
It's our new band name, by the way.
Friar Tuck and the boys from the woods.
Yeah.
But that would have been fine and would have made sense, but her charging in just to get almost get Robin in trouble and stuff like that, it really didn't make any sense to me. But it was worth overlooking for the entirety of the movie. It was a great movie. That was one that I had skipped because I think I had just kind of maybe more or less cinematic Robin Hood overload at that point. I was like, what are we doing with another Robin Hood movie?
Yeah.
And then of course they did one a couple of years later with that kid who did nothing but parkour, and I didn't watch that. I didn't watch that one either. But this one was worth watching.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Like the Russell Crowe. I was a little Russell Crowe'd out, I think, the first time I had exposure to that, and just kind of backburnered it for years. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot this was a thing. And then watched it, and I was like, actually, that was pretty good. So what was the other one you watched? So we caught up on Robin Hood.
The other one I hearkened back to the year of our Lord 1990. So I was, when this movie came out, let's see, I was 12 when it came out. So I didn't really see it when it was kind of fresh and new. I did probably see it once in my 20s, but really hadn't gone back to it. And it was the Christian Slater cult classic, Pump Up the Volume.
Yeah.
And the reason I watched it was because my daughter is kind of on a kick of kind of exploring the especially 80s movies and 90s movies. She's really wants to kind of get a catalog in her head of cultural references of those kind of things. And so I came home one day and she was watching that movie, which I probably shouldn't have. Once I watched it, I was like, there was a lot to that movie that was a little rated R for her. But she's nearly 18, so I'm at that point where I'm like, I guess you're allowed to watch it, kind of thing.
Right.
I can't protect you forever. But what it was, and so I had kind of caught a little bit of piece of it, and Erin had asked me to kind of watch it because she thought I might find it interesting to get my perspective on what the message was. And it really tied into what we were discussing a couple weeks ago on the generational gap between boomers and millennials. Yep. And there's this generation that Gen X, the generation that I'm right dead in the middle of, that there's a skip over of that. And so I watched this movie, and for those who haven't seen this, I'm obviously, it was made in the 90s, so F you on the spoilers. But so basically, Christian Slater plays a kid who has just recently, in the last couple of months, moved to this new town in Arizona, left all of his friends. He's an only child. His mom and dad are, engaged, but kind of doing their own thing, ex-hippies who kind of conformed into, the dad is like the superintendent of the school and the mom is doing her own kind of career path thing. And they kind of just leave this guy alone because he's moody. He's Christian Slater. Of course, he's moody. And, he's in his basement.
90s version of dark and brooding, whatever that could be.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's in his basement and he set up his basement as like his hangout lounge, but he's also put together a really kind of sophisticated, but kind of put together with bubblegum and scotch tape pirate radio. And he started just, as his free time, he's really shy in public because he doesn't know anybody and he's left all of his friends, barely ever talks at school, gets good grades, but stays under the radar, doesn't hang out with anybody or talk to anybody. But then he gets on the mic at home and he just kind of explores the thoughts of the teenagers during a time frame where they had no great battle.
Right.
Their battle was being not heard.
Right.
And that the parents were too busy because they were kind of self-centered boomers. They hadn't yet had the next generation of kids yet, but I think this movie was trying to explore a concept that it hadn't been able to really come to fruition yet because there wasn't a generation past them.
Right.
But it was really kind of exploring the concept of this whole generation is rudderless, wandering, and is angsty and giving up on all things protocol, and all things, and just going, we don't want to have anything to do with this stupid system. You guys have built a really dumb system we want nothing to do with. And it was the first kind of like screech, like eagle screech of that, but ultimately the movie was left without any answers. Once you get to the end, you're kind of like, all right, that was kind of dumb.
Just a day trip through existentialism from the teenage mind in the 1990s. Yeah,
exactly. But I think that in context to today, it actually makes more sense.
Yeah,
it just didn't have the context back then for it to make sense. And so now, looking back on it, I was like, yeah, there's a whole generation of these kids who grew up and still have this attitude of like, who cares? No one's listening. I'm just going to do my own thing.
Right.
And now you have an entire middle group of people, whether it be in business or government or otherwise,
who
have that attitude.
Exactly.
Who have that attitude of like, you're both dumb. I don't care. I'm just going to do my own thing because I've learned to deal with just me and my stuff and take care of my family, my things, and everything else can get the bird. And so it's become, I think that it could be re-explored. Like, I hate redone movies, but I think this one maybe deserves it.
Yeah, and so, I think so too. Like, I didn't watch the film. I did get the screen notes after we spoke about it. I think we did like a pre-show meet, and you had brought it up. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Slater's character, when dad takes new job or whatever, moves to Arizona, originally builds this as a method to try and stay in communication, like with his friends back home, like a ham radio kind of situation, but then realizes that much later on that it's like actually pirate radio that people can tune into, and it's like taking over a certain frequency, and then he just runs with it after a while. Yeah.
And all the local kids at the high school and around the area are all kind of tuning in to his kind of crazy antics. And him just kind of like exploring like existential thought, but then slapping in a bunch of really crude humor, and they think he's a wild man, and they're all like sitting.
I mean, if you boil it down, Christian Slater invented the podcast basically in this movie.
Essentially, yeah. Yeah,
everything we do will live on forever in the internet. So
right. So yeah, and he's got all these kids that are like, for whatever reason, parking in grass parking lots and football fields, all sitting in their cars, all listening to the show together. But then it starts, of course, getting out of hand, and he's influencing people, and a kid, he doesn't help a kid enough to not commit suicide. And it really hits him. And like, these kids.
So they touch on some pretty mature themes throughout this as they.
Huge themes. Yeah. Girls getting abused, girls not feeling as if their peers and parents understand them, and then like going bananas because of his advice, and thinking that he was just speaking to the general public, but they take it personally because they're not being heard. So when they think that this person is talking to them, and yeah, like there's a lot of pretty dark themes in it, and it's not a comedy by any stretch of the imagination. It is very much not a comedy, and so the ideas that it does explore are heavy, but without resolution. There's no like, well, this is the answer.
Right.
It leaves it open-ended on all of the things, and the end of the movie is really open-ended. It kind of gives you a loose, like, raise your voice, speak out. And then so at the end, like all of the kids, they start playing like little clips of the kids all doing their own pirate radio stuff, as if that was the answer to it all. If everyone just needs to
I was about to ask, was your child inspired enough to start vlogging her journalistic thoughts into the void of the internet post watching this film, or what?
Possibly, but not quite yet. She's probably entertained thoughts of it, I would imagine. She's very funny, and so and very quick-witted, so it would be something that would probably suit her well.
As somebody who can make a suggestion, and you're obviously the yay or nay to it, especially because she's not 18 yet. She could come on this show and give you and I a lesson on what's happening in teenage pop culture, and do like a 5-10 minute segment on all the bullshit that's going on out there, and watch us drool going, I don't understand a word of this.
It wouldn't be that. It wouldn't be that at all.
15 minutes of life according to a teenage kid. I don't know. No, she's very articulate and not in with the modern TikToking, but it would be hilarious to get a segment from that era.
It would be a segment based around like what she hates about her age group. That would be literally what the segment would be. It was just
what would be great, dude.
Yeah, she does not fit in well with her age group and does not care to.
Live updates from the household. That'd be great.
Yeah. That might work. I would be interested in doing that. So she would just have to be interested in doing that.
Right. And be like, come in once every 3 or 4 months and give us a quarterly outtake on teenage life.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
We'd probably end up learning more in that 15-minute segment than we do reading the news or going about our professional lives.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Oh yeah, they're without a doubt. But ultimately, though, the movie had an incredible soundtrack, though.
Nice.
So really kind of awesome, kind of 80s punk rock, new wave, a lot of kind of obscure stuff. The character that Christian Slater played had a really good taste in music.
Yeah.
And so I did enjoy that aspect of it. But I would recommend that people view it, but without expectation. Like it's a good watch. And if you're exploring it for kind of the social concepts and applying it to modern times, it's a fun thought experiment. It's a fun thought experiment put on top of a mediocre movie.
Nice.
With a great soundtrack.
As all J.J. Abrams films are.
So
laugh at my own joke and spit water all over the front of me. Well, that's going to lead me into asking a few questions. I'm going to call this one, I want to be in a rock band and more midlife crisis ideas with Angel and Lucky.
All right.
I got the sports car. My model came with a 24-year-old poli-sci major. Go figure. I'm going in for frosted tips next week.
Right.
To be honest, like all midlife crisising aside, I actually kind of want to start playing music again, man. I really do.
Really?
And I'm trying to figure out, like, is this you just midlife crisising? Is it you, like, what would you even write about these days? Like, most of the angst and fuck the world element of the deep sorrow is gone. I've had a couple of songs picked up. I've worked in the studio for a few bands before that have had music come out. Never really could put my own thing together more so than, we're playing a show at the, local bar, bowling alley, welcome to the beautiful tour bus headed toward Vacaville, California, where all record companies are just pouring out of the woodwork to fucking sign you. Right. It didn't make any money and life went on. But no, I think it would be fun. I'm like actually interested in figuring out if I want to pick music back up. I don't know if it'd be like a produce at self at home kind of thing or what, but initial gut reaction, good idea, bad idea, get the fuck out of here. We don't need another Bryan Adams at your age. Like, I don't know.
Well, yeah. Actually, I think it's a great idea because I think that also on top of maturity, you have a better ear.
Yeah.
And a better understanding of the technical aspects of it.
And not everything I write is in drop D anymore. Go figure. Yeah. And no offense to the Deftones. Just saying.
Yeah. And you also don't need it to survive. You don't need to make money doing it. So there's a flexibility and creativity there that I think you can explore at this age where you wouldn't have been able to at the earlier ages. However, there is the pitfall, like you had previously mentioned, where I don't know. You're not a Tool fan, are you?
No more so than I like a couple of the tracks on their records. I went to the 10,000 Days tour because I had tickets to it at the Gorge with your wife's brother. That's a fun story for another podcast.
Right. I remember that.
No, they're not on my regular playlist.
I am a fan, but that has limits. And
exactly right. I'm right there too.
I'm one of those weirdos, that everyone always complains about that. I like their older stuff.
Yeah.
But the biggest issue is, I don't know if you remember, sometime in the middle of the dark ages, the pandemic years, they put out an album.
They did.
It was the first one in a long time. And I was really excited because I was hoping that we would get something that was an album from a band like Tool out of something from the dark ages, such as a time when the entire planet got shut down for a disaster. Right. And you would think that would produce an angsty understanding of either rebellion or whatever the case may be. There was definitely material to use there. Or
you would get a extremely affluent, very wealthy vineyard owning Maynard James Keenan later in life that's producing the last of 5 records he was required to satiate that record deal from 25 years ago that they signed, and it's dog shit.
Could be dog shit.
Yeah, it could be one or the other. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because even a Perfect Circle stuff was like, I don't know. This is kind of interesting coming from Maynard. Know,
it's tolerable, and Pucifer was tolerable. All of his other side projects were tolerable, but they weren't like the punchiness that Tool had and the emotion that Tool had. And so this album, it was literally written from a vineyard. It was ridiculous. The man has nothing to worry about anymore. Mm-hmm. And it showed in his music. It was boring. It was so boring. And I wanted to like it. So there is the pitfall of that when you do not have an avenue, but I don't think that's where you're at.
Just get on Fiverr and get me some ghostwriters, dude. All the rappers are doing it.
I just don't think that's where you're at. I think that you are in a place where you have a maturity where you could actually write music of not only interest, but of import. Like, I think that you have a perspective on the world and not so much fluff around you that you don't get what's going on around you or what the problems that are looming or that the important issues that need to be discussed through music or even just your own personal life. Like, I think that you definitely have a cornucopia of material to work with that I think would lend itself to the fact that you're in a position that you don't need to make money, so there's no pressure on it. And on top of that, you also are not encumbered by the pitfalls of being 22,
right?
And trying to be in a band.
That's the biggest worry. Is it's like who would I find? I mean, first of all, how do you do this? Do you go put an ad on Craigslist? Like, how do you find guys that want to play music or write music if it's a live band setting? And further, how do you find dudes in the exact same position that are in their late 30s that want to jam out and just produce some piece of music one way or the other? That, I'm sure they've got 3 kids at home and they got to dust off the drum set that's been in the garage for 14 years. And I just don't know, but it's something that's been on my... You
literally write an ad like that.
Yeah.
You write an ad and say, are you this guy?
Yeah. Does this appeal to you? Like,
yeah.
Do you hate Weezer's Blue album because they played it too much?
I can literally recite every word and note to that whole album.
Yeah. But no, it's just been on my head for a while. I'm like, man, what? Because truly somebody was asking me, and it wasn't like a young intern that came in and was like, how do you cope with corporate life and what do you do for fun? But it was like one of those, what do you do for fun types of questions. And I'm like, you have your canned answer that's like, I don't know. I motorcycle a lot and I fix and wrench on cars. And what do I do for fun? I got podcasts. There's only a few people I can tell about that. Because I work for Redacted. And so it's one of those things where it keeps coming up over and over again. And I'm like, I should just make music. I just don't know how or how I'd find other folks like that. So I don't know. Yeah. I was like, what's the early reaction? Are you midlife crisising and you need to get checked by your boy to tell you, bro, leave the crying and listening to Thursday and Coheed and Cambria back where it was 20 years ago? Or
bring it back.
Or bring it back.
Bring it back.
Yeah.
Bring it back. Bring it back. No, I absolutely. I think that it is a fundamental core essential part of who you became anyway.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in exploring that. It was a beautiful time for music. You were invested heavily into it, and it makes perfect sense for you to, now that you have the time and capability, to re-explore that. And I don't think that at all. I don't think that it is a midlife crisis cry for help at all. I think it is something that feels very natural. And if you had just said it without the context, I wouldn't even thought to I wouldn't have been like, what are you doing, dude? You're too old for that.
Yeah,
that's dumb.
Don't write it from a vineyard. I would never
thought that.
Got that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
That's basically the advice I have. Just don't follow.
Well, but it's exactly that premise that, like, when I hear of a band that I used to love a lot that's about to drop a new record, I'm like on the borderline of cringing a little bit, where I'm like, this is going to be, someone's trying to pay the bills. Like, this is going to be weird. Like, why is Matt Skiba playing for Blink-182? Like, what's this all mean?
That was awful, by the way. Every song was about California for some reason.
Including the record, name of the record, wasn't it? Wasn't it just called California? I don't know.
It was awful. It was not a good combination. I enjoy both in their own respects.
Yeah, totally. It was a weird mishmash of things, but you're like, wow, Pierce the Veil's going to cut a new record? Like, these guys are like in their mid to late 40s. I don't think they're going to be like screaming 5 octaves above their natural tonal limits and stuff. And they weren't, it's very 4/4 time, almost alternative rock. And it's like, I don't think I'm going to seek that as a primary means of expressing myself. And that's probably where it's different than it was 20 years ago. Because I have and I have outlets, and media things that I do and podcasting and stuff like that. So I think it is way different mindset approach, but I was just kind of toying with it. Like, is this, or, why not? But then also, what are you doing?
Well, here's the thing though. I think that your interests and your understanding of things, what is really lacking and what has been a joke within a lot of like my old circles, being punk rock circles, is that there's a massive, not only lack, but hunger currently for anti-authoritarian type of rock.
Yeah.
Or
sign of the times, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not there. There's very few voices coming out in that kind of regard. But most of the bands, like you and I have spoken before, like have all kind of capitulated to the machine. And
Oh yeah.
it is disheartening to say the least. But I think that there is, like I said, a hunger and a void that needs to be filled. And even if you're only kind of poking at it in a fun way, or even just touching on it or exploring it within the means of your other interests, which you have a lot of, and a lot of understanding of a lot of things, that is something that I think would propel the music in the emotional way that you think that you might be lacking in due to your comfortability. Does that make sense?
Well, it's that, and I'm also in a complete lack of create space for my job. And so I do stuff like this because it's a bit cathartic, but it's also important to me because I have the ability. And I think if you can, you should, if it's interesting to you. And, you know, I've been in a podcast medium one way or another for 10 or more years, you know, between Foundations, Pathway, guesting on a few, you know, to now. And I think the tone of my communication is getting a little bit better, and I have that, but where I work all day, there's just it's very rigid. It's extremely rigid. There's rules, there's stuff you got to keep up with. And I don't go out and go drinking and go to shows and do all that stuff. So it's like, actually I was on the other side of that for quite a while, you know, and I actually enjoy making music. So like maybe I don't know, maybe I'll try that out. But yeah, it's that and other midlife crisis ideas I'm willing to field at this point. I got the car. I may as well go frost the tips, as it were.
Well, I say I give it a green light. If it's a midlife crisis, it's a good one to have. So, but
we'll just try to reduce the fentanyl use.
Yeah, just stay off the
Rockstar list. Yeah. Oh my god. That was all I had for that. I just wanted to field some stuff, get some midlife crisis juices flowing, as it were.
I've been kind of curious when mine's going to hit. I'm 45, and you know, you start contemplating things and you start exploring those kind of things.
What are some of your bucket list things? I mean, honestly, because you've done a ton of really bizarre shit, and like myself, in a lot of ways, it was like circumstantially odd, but like necessary to further the there is no plan B type of lifestyle. So, like, what are you know, you could skydiving, and I want to, you know, but honestly,
funny you mention that.
Are there things like that you're like, hey, I got these bucket list things. It's now or never. Let's pop the collar. We'll twist the hat on backwards, and we'll just fucking pretend like we still got it.
Nope. Like there was a time frame that I had, like, you know, getting a motorcycle or getting or actually skydiving and a couple of other things that but I have become far more risk averse as I get older. I just don't, and it's not that I'm afraid to do those things. I just don't care. I'm like, nah, like the idea of jumping out of a plane doesn't scare me. If I was in a situation where it was kind of force fed to me, I'd do it and it wouldn't bother me, but I'm not actively pursuing it. I don't want to. Like there was a time I almost did twice and they both fell through. That I was like, yeah, it's something I want to do. I just it has fallen off and out of the bucket list. I'm like, if I never jump out of a plane before I die, it's not going to hurt my feelings. And same thing with the motorcycle. Now, like I'm almost like anti-motorcycle now, and I think that's the old grumpy man in me, where it's like, and it's not for it's not for all of them, but there's a vast like. Frank at my shop, he got a motorcycle and all of a sudden he's like Mr. Motorcycle, right? He's Mr. Harley Davidson. His whole world is that, right? And that's fine, whatever. But it's almost like alcoholics when they need you to drink too.
Right.
And they get offended that if you're not drinking.
So I went through this too. I'll give you my perspective on it, but go ahead.
But so what he'll do is he'll send me on Instagram, he'll send me video after video of these guys on not even the type of bike he rides, but like, you know, Japanese real fast bikes, right? And they're just these videos of these insane people just lane splitting at like 110.
Right. All the dumb fuckery that, yeah.
Right. And those videos drive me crazy because, you know, we're being told constantly as car drivers, watch out for us, watch out for us. You're always, you know, not paying attention to us, but we're allowed to do that and completely put everybody at risk. And then and there was this video he sent me, he goes, this guy had a message afterwards. He goes, those are the people I fuck with. Those are the people that, you know, take risks and they either give you all or nothing. Right. And I'd rather have people who give it all than fuck with people who give you nothing. So take it or leave it. And I was like, there's a middle ground there. You could not put other people's lives at risk for your own thrill factor. And to be not reliable because you want to take too much thrill and risk, if that's the message you're sending, I'll take none of the thrill and risk and take the reliable slow person. But whatever. And that's the old man in me now. Like there was a point where I probably would have a different perspective, but whatever.
Yeah, let me give you an alternate take on that, because I've had a few years to refine the sales pitch. On the one hand, I went through the mania as well, and it was not so much seeking other, like a social gathering where other people can, you know, accredit me for doing the right thing and being part of the team or the club or affirmation of my new hobby. It was trying to share the excitement of how fucking awesome it was. And to your point about the fuck with those guys, whatever, like, look, if I started motorcycling in my early 20s, high likelihood I'd be dead, period. Because I didn't have much to lose. It was dick flopping in the wind, twist the throttle, drop a gear and disappear. To be honest, though, what my perspective is, I was riding on the California coastline on the PCH on Highway 1, and there's a piece of road that's extremely windy as you drop into a place called Jenner, California. It's right on the mouth of the Russian River on Highway 1 on the end. It's north of San Francisco by a little bit. You can actually go around these windy corners at 10, 15 miles an hour and feel like you're in MotoGP. And you're like, this is amazing. Because but you're zoned. There's no influence. There's no phone. There's no screen to stare at. There's nothing. And I got to a point where, like, the marine layer was really low and the sun was burning off whatever cloud cover there was, like right around 1:32 in the afternoon. And it felt like I was on top of the earth floating out in space alone. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced in my life. And I was like, this is fucking rad. It wasn't like, you know, grinding it, putting knees down and, you know, doing track day style, not being egregious. And you do have to be cautious of other drivers on the road as you would in a car or whatever. But the sights and the smells and the sensory overload, it's like every dude wants to own a motorcycle and doesn't know it yet until they throw their leg over one and go out and experience that. And so I got the same manic approach. Everyone should take the class. It's so much fun. I'm sending videos. How sick is this? What kind of helmet should I get? Blah, blah, blah. But now my sales pitch is this. Like, hey, if you've got a bucket list item, like I would like to be licensed to operate this vehicle. If you have $100, over the ankle boots, long sleeve shirt and jeans, you can go take the class. They will provide a motorcycle to you, even a helmet to you, gloves, the whole 9 yards. You don't have to worry about wrecking at low speeds. It's not your shit. But they will take you in a 3-day course from I've never seen one of these before to I'm licensed to ride these in a very staggered way. Like, here's a bike. Here's how you push the bike. Here's how much it weighs, blah, 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 all the way to the last little course thing that you do stacks to the next one. Then they line everybody up, and the final time you put all 10 together, when you go through it, they're actually grading you. And then they hand you passed. Now you go pay and get... And if it's the worst experience of your life, you can just walk the fuck away. If it's the best thing, whether you get a bike or not, you could be like, hey, I accomplished a task. I have a little endorsement to ride this thing, or I'm licensed to own a deal. Bucket list item achieved, check box. I had fun learning. It was zero cost and risk to me other than the $100. And my kind of take on that is like, I've spent more than $100 on dinner for two before on a weekend. That's a way more fun to fuck off $100 to me is to go learn a new skill. But to be honest, like, I talked to a guy when I was in Texas about that that ride for various different reasons, because that's how I usually spend my vacation. I'll ride typically from Seattle to San Diego and back on the PCH. It takes about 14 days. I budget to do it. I'll stop at cool restaurants, donut shops, brewery, whatever, take pictures of lighthouses. I don't feel like riding today. I'll stay the night. I'll go extra long the next day. You run into some weather. It's an adventure. It's just a pure adventure. And it's not, there's no, if I only make it to Santa Cruz and go back, hey, whatever, I made it to Santa Cruz. I was talking to this guy about it, and he was like, dude, I would kill to have an experience like that, just to see what that feels like once. And how I've done it 7 years in a row. I recognize that different strokes for different folks, because I was in a way different geography. But nowadays, I mean, the only place you can lane filter like that is California State. And I've seen CHP on Harleys zip by at 5 times the speed I am, just trying to get through traffic, But ultimately, it's fun. It's a fun way to get around and chill and get away from stuff, because you can't be fucked with until you stop and then check your phone and do whatever. Now, of course, I attach a camera to my helmet. I've got Bluetooth radio. I can communicate with other riders if I want to, and all the other technical horse shit. But ultimately, had I started riding way earlier in life, when I had a devil may cry attitude toward life or whatever, I would have wrecked badly. And I've been in a couple of motorcycle accidents, and they're not fun. But it's a different outtake, I think. Yeah. And even if you're just cruising around, it's like, get a license, try it once. If you don't buy a bike or whatever, you don't buy one. Not a big deal. But I was that manic dude, like your shop artist, that was just like, oh, dude, because it's exciting and you're manic about it, and you want everyone to know how exciting it is, and you just don't know how to communicate that without it being this, like getting waterboarded with all this information you don't give a fuck about, like guys on super bikes lane splitting at 600 miles an hour and shit. But it'll fade. It'll pass a little bit. It always does.
Well, and I don't know, I've thought about this, and I think because of all the stuff that I've done and all the hobbies that skateboarding, snowboarding, and then collecting of everything between comic books and movies and toys and all, and I've given up all of it. Like, there isn't a thing that I actually have as a hobby anymore. And it almost worried me, because I was like, does that strip me of my identity? And that, I think, was very briefly lived. And I went, no, it doesn't. Yeah. I have a great family. I know who I am. I'm not worried about it. And I kind of live for my wife and kids, and enjoy their hobbies. I like fishing every once in a while now, but not to a point where I'm, going out more than a couple of times a year.
You're not scheduling a Montana fly fishing trip with, exactly. No. Yeah.
So, but really, I think my midlife crisis is to come, when I boil it down, is what I want to do is I want to buy property in the middle of nowhere and farm and raise animals.
Yeah.
That's my midlife crisis. And it's super weird, but I grew up in that kind of way.
Right.
And I escaped it and did all of the adventures.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I'm good. I did all the adventures. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything, or that I'm lacking on anything, that I like. If I get to do other stuff, it's all kind of like bonus extra stuff. So I'm super okay as long as I pass the torch of adventurism to my 2 kids.
Right.
And then I can kind of live, and vicariously through their experiences rather than me doing it. And
well, at least get a 4-wheeler if you get all this property. I mean, you gotta have something to fuck around on when you're out there.
Oh yeah, for sure. And a gun range out there, stuff like that. Like things that, for me, strangely, all of the fun stuff now for me is also practical stuff.
Right.
So like, I don't really have to explore interests or pursuits that I haven't yet done. So I don't know. My midlife crisis may hit me like a ton of bricks, and I'm like out of nowhere just go, I have to have a Corvette or whatever the the thing But as of right now at 45, mine may come late. I might be a late bloomer to the midlife crisis thing, but I think it may be because I'm too busy, just getting by with the kids and stuff to actually really focus on whether or not I'm happy with who I am at the moment. I don't know, but I think that you should start playing music because I want to listen to it, not because you.
Well, we'll see. I got to start putting some building blocks together. But there's another guy that plays guitar, lives in Seattle. Is coming down in Gig Harbor. He's one of the boys. He's going to come down next month. I'll actually pick his brain a little bit about that. Be like, hey man, what do you think about all this? And should we do our own postal service project where I will record pieces and mail them to you, and you can record over them and mail them back? And who knows? That might be something fun because all my connections to that shit are like way out of town, right? And I'm like, oh, there's no open mic to go do anymore, and it's what am I going to go into Las Vegas? I mean, those guys get paid big money for residencies and shit, so it's like I don't think there's any open mics around here, but you never know.
They're all on the outskirts.
They're very much, dusty bars and country bars and stuff. So
yeah.
Well, that's all I had this week. What do you think?
Me too.
You got anything else?
Yeah. No, I think I'm solid. I got to go make chicken soup.
Sick.
So, yeah.
All right, friends. Well, I will have this is up. This will be up on YouTube today. We will see you all tomorrow on the rest of the audio sources once this thing finishes loading. And we will see you next week.
I'm excited. We actually finished a full, non-interrupted episode. Right. That's awesome.
Feels good.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Feels good.
See ya.
All right.